every day, usually before 9 o'clock. Um, because the first thing I do is get up, drink some coffee, try to figure out what's going on. And today's financial news is actually going to start with something I read about Bill Gates. So some people put Bill Gates' net worth at over $100 billion. This article had him pegged at 109, which is just a crazy large number. Uh, but the point of this article is actually Bill Gates is kind of indicating that his net worth is proof that the economy, the system, quote unquote, is not fair. That article went on to highlight Buffett and Mark Cuban and some other folks, and it really got me thinking two things. First and foremost, do we have an income kind of disparity problem or a wealth disparity problem or both? Do we have an education issue or challenge? Where does this quote unquote system that Bill Gates in this article talked about, where does it kind of break down? So, first and foremost is someone who once had a six-figure income, right? W-2 salary, all of that, and now has been out of the quote unquote job market for a couple of years, whose, I don't know, net worth is tied to being a landlord and the deductions that come with that. I can tell you that not having an income tax, right? No wages this year. I haven't done my taxes yet, but I'm sure they'll be similar to last year. Um, my tax, I don't know what you would call it, tax liability, I guess you'd call it, right? Actual taxes paid will be lower and significantly lower than when I had a W 2, where the quote unquote income or whatever you want to call it is near the same, right? So, I guess that tells me is income taxes are working, right? They're a gradient. And the more income you make, the star athletes pay ridiculously amounts of income, for example, right? They're paid $30 million a year or whatever they're paid. So I think with income tax is fine. That leads to the other side, right? Is the wealth challenge. And I'm on record not being a fan of taxing assets. However, when those assets are traded, I think we do need to, yep, see you in about 20 minutes. What I do think we need to do is when assets trade or sold, I think we need to raise those taxes, most frequently called either capital gains tax or estate tax. I think that's where you can kind of level the playing field, right? Because when you think about the wealthy, at least all the wealthy that I've tracked, none of them got their wealth from a salary. And we need to remember that. So, all these income tax discussions we have all the time, it's not about income. So, that means we need to raise the tax on capital gains, right? I think today it's 15%, but it's been so long since I've sold anything like that, I have no idea. I think it's 15. Might be 20, I don't remember. But there was a time when it was much, much higher. I think if you did that, you would see a rise in a tax basis that would be disproportionately hit on the quote unquote wealthy, right? Because they're the ones that own assets. The other one that needs to be talked about or looked at is the estate tax, right? When inevitably it comes in Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or cloning or something just yet. So when their wealth moves on, there needs to be a beefy tax there to kind of put it back into the system. So that's kind of what I think needs to happen. But I think that'll just affect the system at the edges. What I think we really need to do is we need to bring financial education to our school systems. I'm talking, it needs to be a subject like in grade school, in junior high and high school. The fact that you can go through all school today learning about Jupiter and Mars and not learn how to manage a checkbook and that credit cards are bad is, well, frankly, it's sad. So I think we need to invest in our kids so that when they become our age, the average, I guess, adult at that point would be better financially educated. That is something that we should do. We should invest in bringing financial education, just like biology or trigonometry or English lit. It needs to be a mandatory subject, and it should start in grade school, right? Start talking about allowances, or introduce them to taxes, right? Then I forget who said it, but you want to teach your 5-year-old about taxes? Eat 30% of his ice cream. That'll get their attention, right? So I just think it's sad that financial education is not part of the system, and that's what I think we should do. I think that's the big thing. And you could change at the edges, the capital gains tax, estate tax, but the uber wealthy will find a way to loopholes, legal loopholes, but loopholes nonetheless, to do that. Uh, Now back on to what's going on in the stock market. Really, again, the daily financial news. It's funny. We seem to be a day ahead of the mass media, which is kind of cool. At least a day ahead. I've been talking about the last couple of days. It seems like everybody is bullish on stocks. Be careful, right? When everybody gets in, I get nervous. Those kinds of things. So just remember, we have lots of things that could be disruptors. We have obviously this geopolitical risks, what just reared its ugly head the last 48 hours. Everybody's looking at that today, but that's not it. We have the trade war. The trade wars, we have a signing of some phase one thing supposedly on January 15th. What happens if that gets canceled? What happens if the bigger trade negotiations, which last I heard Trump was going to China to talk about, what happens if that doesn't happen? We have earnings growth, which thus far has been lackluster. But when your price to earnings ratios are stretched so high, we need earnings growth, or eventually people are going to realize the stock market's overpriced. Inflation could rear its ugly head, right? This could be sparked first by oil, right, which is again tied to geopolitical risk. But oil is, if you don't remember 4 or 5 years ago when oil was $100 a barrel, that ripples through the economy, right? So there's lots of things that could come. Not to mention, I think something that is just a foregone conclusion. This election cycle is going to be nasty. It is unfortunately going to divide our country, which is just a sad state of affairs. And um, it could cause people to sit on their hands. And that's, again, what really causes the economy to slow down is when people stop taking out their credit cards and they just start saving because they're either nervous about something or they're focused on something else for a couple of months. That could cause a recession. So starting in July, August, I think things are going to get pretty choppy. So just realize that everything isn't rosy. I'm on record back in December saying, "Hey, smooth sailing ahead. Expect the market to go up." Nailed it. We were right. I expect things to get pretty choppy, at least in the early part of January, as people kind of figure out where they are, what's going on in the market. So be careful. Next up, I found an article about the 10 boom cities that you can live in on 60K or less. And this is what California needs to figure out, right? California is being so anti home ownership, anti business, anti landlord, and people are just going to give up and move because you can live somewhere else on 60 grand a year. You don't have to make the ridiculous salaries that you have to make to live in the Bay Area. So these 10 cities, no particular order. I'm going to give the city and the average home value here, and we'll just run through the list of 10. So you have Charlotte, North Carolina, 245K. Dallas, Texas, 262. Des Moines, Iowa, 208. El Paso, Texas, 158. No idea. Fort Myers, Florida, 250. Grand Rapids, Michigan, 200. Houston, Texas, 240. New Orleans, Louisiana, 216. Oklahoma City, 165. And San Antonio, Texas, 231. That's the 10. I'm going to throw in Fresno just because that's where I invest. And one of the reasons I invest there is because it can be a boom city. It's over 1 million people in the county and over 500,000 in the city. Its average median home price, the last time I looked, which was months ago, was 262. And again, you can live there on 60K a year. So pretty amazing stuff. So in the end, be careful if you're in the market. Ask yourself what's going on. You have to see that the valuations are stretched. Realize that there are risks out there that could just rear its ugly head. Interesting talking about wealth and income tax, and having leaders like Bill Gates and Buffett talk about they should be taxed more. Realize they're not talking about income taxes. It's something else. And then, of course, we have the 10 boom cities. So, in the end, that's the daily financial news, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Take care.